Hello, everyone. Gary here from timelineastrology.com. This is the August 2023 forecast. I'm using the Sidereal Zodiac, and let's get straight into it. So, first of all, I just want to say that I think August, continuing on from July, is going to be a very volatile period. That's a lot to do with Venus retrograde as it goes back to Sidereal Cancer, beginning in Leo. And while it's doing that, Mars is in Leo, opposite Saturn. So the exact opposition has passed. So we've seen the more intensification of that more recently. And Mars opposite Saturn in Leo and Aquarius, the fire and air signs, of course, have shown the recent wildfires, the sort of tinderbox situation that's been going on in Greece, for example, as well as the opposition between the Sun in Cancer and Pluto in Capricorn. Remember, these are the sidereal signs. So these kinds of themes, big themes, are showing really the big themes and oppositions between the signs Cancer, Leo, and Capricorn, Aquarius anyway. That's always the setup. That's always the case. But now we're seeing an intensification of that because planets are transiting through here. So the faster moving planets always move through Cancer and Leo at this time of year anyway, with the Sun moving through Cancer and Leo, and Venus and Mercury never far away. Mars is also present this year. And then on the opposite side, we haven't had this in, well, we have had it in the last few years, but we haven't had it for many, many years. What we have on the other side of the zodiac in Capricorn and Aquarius are Pluto and Saturn. And that's going to be an ongoing theme. Of course, it began in 2020 as soon as Saturn and Pluto entered Capricorn. And it continues because Pluto is in Capricorn for another almost 20 years. Saturn is in Aquarius for another couple of years. So again, every time you have these kind of big hitters like Pluto and Saturn in these signs, Capricorn, Aquarius, you're going to have the faster moving planets at this time of year moving through the signs Cancer and Leo opposite. And they're going to therefore highlight this opposition and these big themes. And what it essentially means, and I'll talk about it in terms of the release of those two movies, Barbie and Oppenheimer, why that has grabbed everyone's attention, it has really said something of the zeitgeist, is that it's highlighting the themes of these signs, these oppositions, and they are essentially wanting to have some sense of safety and security and have some fun. That's Cancer and Leo. And at the same time, having this existential crisis, which is Capricorn and Aquarius with Pluto and Saturn, questioning what are we doing here and where are we going. And these movies, Barbie, you might not think Barbie is doing that, but Barbie and Oppenheimer both do that. So anyway, let's get into the transits. The first thing to say is that there are a lot of retrogrades, lots and lots of retrogrades. Actually, the only planet that's not retrograde or beginning to retrograde into September is Mars. It's the only planet that's actually moving forward, but itself is going to move into Virgo, and by that stage, Mercury will have already begun its retrograde. So it's kind of going to be dragged into it in a way, in one way or another. So Pluto has already retrograde from May. It will continue till October, Neptune from June till December, and now Uranus joins these outer planets by the end of August until January next year. This is actually the last Uranus retrograde in sidereal Aries. It's a full retrograde at least, because it will move into sidereal Taurus next year, 2024, but it will back up into Aries before going back into Taurus finally in 2025 and remain there for a few more years. So we definitely have a change, a shift going on next year in terms of the Uranus Aries story. And that has been the case since 2016 when it moved in here. And we've seen a lot of changes on our planet since 2016, a lot of upsets, a lot of shocks. That's what Uranus can do, especially in Aries, ruled by Mars, the planet of war, and all of that. But also about just kind of the impulse to move and to do something, and maybe not even, and not think it through, essentially. Aries is very much sort of act first, think later sort of sign. So when you put Uranus in Aries, it kind of really can explode things and lots of examples of that, of course. And, Brexit comes to mind, decisions that are taken that are not really thought through. Uranus retrograde, though, and this last full retrograde in a way in Aries, is asking us, I think, to really adjust to all these changes that have happened in the last few years before we move into the next set of changes that happen in Taurus. And there are always changes, of course. But I think the changes that are happening next year with Uranus and Taurus are going to bring about a lot of changes, obviously, in the economy. But I think they can be positive. And it's going to do so with Jupiter. So Jupiter and Uranus both move into sidereal Taurus by next summer, May 2024. And so we're going to see a lot of changes in terms of money and currency, even maybe new currencies, digital currencies, probably. So there's sort of, I think, yeah, that's a whole other, right? And food and all of that will be a big issue there. And all of that shows more change in that realm. But Aries, with it being the planet of war, being ruled by that planet of war, Mars, I think that at least that's a lesser sort of intense kind of configuration in one way as well. So this is an opportunity, in other words, this retrograde into the new year, to adjust to all of these changes so that next year you can hit the ground running for the changes that have to happen in Taurus, essentially. So the other retrograde to mention here is Saturn from June until November. It continues, and it continues to really stoke things. This is part of why we're seeing so much extreme weather at this time. It's in sidereal Aquarius, and that again is opposite Mars in Leo. And again, that's water, that's fire and air, and it's like billows and billowing and setting fire to everything. It's like setting a light to what is already a very dried out situation. However, it also reflects the storminess that is possible because it's in Aquarius, which is an air sign, but Aquarius, of course, is the water bearer. And the lunar mansion it is currently in is called Shatabishaj in Vedic astrology, which is ruled by Varuna, the god of the ocean. So this is a stormy lunar mansion in the middle of sidereal Aquarius. The last time Saturn was here 30 years ago, in 1994, I believe it was the longest hurricane on record in the US. So this Saturn in Aquarius is definitely leading to this kind of perfect storm scenario. So it's not just wildfires, therefore. We are heading into hurricane season. So obviously it means more intense storms. And of course, El Nino is a part of that. And that is reflected in these kinds of configurations. But the other thing I want to say about Saturn retrograde is it's not just storms that, meteorological storms. It's also storms in every which way. It's like this sense of this big, I guess, backstepping in terms of the AI thing, for example. Everyone is getting so freaked out about AI. Saturn in Aquarius is showing the fear that Saturn of AI, that's Aquarius. And now that it's retrograde, you can literally see this happening where, the recent strikes in Hollywood, for example, that's again the opposition with planets in Leo to Saturn retrograde in Aquarius. They're wanting to pull back, they want to step back all of this AI advancement. Now, of course, you cannot stop advancement, you can't stop progress, but you can put in place regulations and laws and systems. That's what Saturn's all about. And that probably will happen at some point. It will have to happen. But it does show the fear response and the anticipation, the prediction of the AI taking over the world and all of that. It's a very fear-based response that Saturn can bring about, especially in Aquarius. So we need to be mindful of that in ourselves as well, and this area of our life as well, because wherever Aquarius is for us in our birth charts shows where we're having to make some major adjustments at this time. So then I mentioned Mars is opposite in Leo, opposite Saturn right now. So, and that continues into the beginning of August, the first half of August until the 18th, where at that point it moves into sidereal Virgo. And so, yes, it's strong in Leo. And so it's obviously showing this kind of the wildfire situation, for example, the heat that's generated. There's a strength there, but then there's also a restriction because it's opposite Saturn. And so you might have felt that through being literally restricted. You think about those people who are trapped on an island that's burning. And so it's the fire, the Mars and Leo, but it's also the Saturn opposite, where it just prevents them from having a holiday, prevents them from enjoying themselves. So that's very much the Saturn imposition on Mars and Leo. When it goes into Virgo, Saturn is no longer opposing. So now Mars in Virgo is in a way kind of allowed free reign in a sense. At that point, though, it will be aspecting Mars's own sign, Aries. Mars has an 8th house aspect. So even though that's an inconjunct, that is a strong aspect from Mars. It's like a fighting stance. And so Mars wants to get into a fight. And when Mars is in Virgo, aspecting Aries, where Rahu and Jupiter are, and Saturn also aspects, we have all of the quote unquote cruel planets, malefic planets, influencing Aries in a strong way by the end of August. And so we're going to see probably an escalation of fighting. We're probably going to see that in the war situation and in many other ways. And again, still heat and still fires. It's aspecting Aries, the fiery sign. So I think that there's definitely the potential here for a lot more fires, for obvious reasons, because if we place this in context, we're talking about the heat of the summer for the Northern Hemisphere. So that's Mars in Leo, and then Mars in Virgo. Mars in Virgo is less, I guess it's less impressed with having to deal with the details, getting caught up in red tape. It wants to just do something, and it cannot just do it. And Virgo has to think about it, and it's going to have to not just think about it, but think twice about it when then Mercury goes retrograde. So before we get to Mercury retrograde, let's talk about the Venus retrograde. And it's really highlighting, I think, again, this story of these two big movies that have come out. And these have both captured the zeitgeist, essentially. And it might seem so bizarre how both Barbie and Oppenheimer, one story about a doll and another story about the atomic bomb. I mean, well, the reason for that is Barbie is reflecting this Venus retrograde in Leo, obviously, because it's basically about people reminiscing about this toy, this doll that they used to play with as a child. So there's that. So there's the other side of that, which is also the Barbie sort of pink, everything looks glossy and lovely Venus retrograde scenario, because Venus retrograde is all about going within and actually asking bigger questions than just the outer stuff, then painting a nice picture, then presenting yourself in a very aesthetically pleasing way. It's more than that. It's asking actually deeper questions. And it's doing so especially because it's opposite Saturn right now. And then it will backtrack into Sidereal Cancer and oppose Pluto again. So that's the other part of it. That is the other sort of angst and essentially an existentialism. So, I mean, it's a movie about Barbie, but really it's about Barbie questioning who she is and what she's doing and about death. So that's literally the Venus retrograde opposite Saturn and Pluto. But Oppenheimer is more obviously this kind of theme of Venus retrograde opposite Saturn and Pluto, because it essentially is talking about this, the Pluto especially. I mean, literally, we're talking about the atomic bomb. So as it's coming out, the sun, remember, is opposite Pluto right now, almost by exact degree. And so it's the sun in Cancer and the need for safety, and opposite Pluto in Capricorn and the need to build this bomb, so that's the whole theme of this movie, Oppenheimer. And this whole thing of the chance that it may, just completely destroy the whole world. And yet they're doing it because they're doing it for safety, because of, war. It's essentially this dichotomy, this opposition between these signs, especially, again, Cancer, Leo, Capricorn, Aquarius. So it's fascinating how these movies have come out now. I always find it interesting anyway that movies are released at a time when they reflect the planets. Whatever about's going on when they are made, because they're not made obviously at that time, they're made maybe years before, at least months before. But as soon as they're released, they reflect what's going on in the heavens, which I always find amazing. So Venus retrograde continues until September, and actually September 4th, which is the day that Jupiter stations retrograde, as it stations direct in Sidereal Cancer, and it won't move back into Leo until October. So there's a lot of back and forth with Venus for the next few weeks and months. And by the way, there are lots of other stories we could grab about this. For example, if you read about what's happening in Afghanistan right now, women in Afghanistan will no longer be able to go to beauty salons. The Taliban are shutting down all beauty salons. in the next few weeks. That's a Venus retrograde indication. Venus is going to go into combustion in August also, so we won't see Venus. It will disappear into the rays of the sun. It will become purified. You might say that's one expression in Afghanistan, but there are many other expressions in every which way. It usually shows a challenge for women, for feminine issues, for our own femininity, whether you identify as male or female. It's not about gender as such. It's more about that feminine aspect, the receptive, the appreciative, the loving and enjoyable aspects of our being. And I think that when it's retrograde, we start to question those things and we look for something deeper, just as reflected in the movie Barbie. So finally, then Mercury's retrograde from August 23rd to mid-September in Leo, in Sidereal Leo. So it is again highlighting Leo, the themes of Leo, all really prominent. So Leo has this interesting kind of, there's two sides to Leo in a way, and we can break that down into the lunar mansions. It's all about power and privilege. It's all about leadership. And it's also about entertainment. It's also about fun. It's also about, actors, and it's all about performers and entertainers and leisure time and all of these things in terms of, again, the big cinema releases. That's very much Leo. But it's also about leaders and leadership and people who govern. So obviously Mercury retrograde in Leo, after Venus has retrograde in Leo, and Mars has moved through Leo, and Saturn's opposition to Leo, and Rahu and Jupiter's aspect to Leo. There's so much emphasis on Leo right now. And I think obviously this shows a big shakeup in world leaders, in leadership in general, in the entertainment industry, and all of that. And again, for your own self personally, just to look at the sign Leo, where it is in your chart, and where do you have that need to shine, to be recognized, to want to perform, maybe to want to share your talents, essentially, is what Leo ultimately ends up with. So just before I get into the lunations, the two full moons, we have two full moons in August and a new moon in the middle of the month. Just want to remind you that you can become a patron for just $5 a month, and you'll get weekday reports from Monday to Friday. I post for patrons. I also have a written report for each month's transits, an in-depth report on all the transits for patrons only. And you also get a timeline report if you sign up. Based on your time, date, and place of birth, you'll get a whole timeline, not based on these transits, but actually based on what are called dashas. In Indian astrology, we focus on these sort of time frames in a sense in your chart, like as if your chart were a book, and they are chapters within a book. So together with transits, they inform really how we predict anything with Vedic astrology, but they are really the meat and bones of it. So more especially than transits. So that's the timeline report. You get monthly reports, as well as the Scorpio Video Club. Now, this is something that where I post on Discord, a very private group where I post perhaps more controversial topics, but also just case studies in terms of looking at people's charts, famous people's charts, and things that I don't feel comfortable posting publicly. And then also I have an philosophy group. This is something I really enjoy because astrology keeps bringing up philosophical discussions, and it's an intriguing part of it, and I think an important part to discuss. So that's another group you can join. So it's all on patreon.com/timeline astrology, or you can go to timelineastrology.com. So before we get into the full moons and that new moon, just to say again that I use the sidereal zodiac. So obviously now we're speaking about Sun moving into sidereal Leo by mid-August to mid-September. So we have, therefore, before it moves into Leo, the Sun in Cancer at the beginning of the month. So therefore we'll have a full moon in Capricorn, and then another full moon by the end of the month in Aquarius because of that. So let's look at these lunations. So the full moon is in Capricorn, August 1st. It's the lunar mansion Shravana. There's a new moon in Cancer, the very last degree of Cancer. And that's interesting because we had the new moon in July, the very first degree of Cancer. So it's again the similar theme of safety. This time it's Ashlesha, and it's very much about attachment issues and looking at what we're attached to and maybe attaching to something new. That's a new moon in Ashlesha on August 16th. And then finally, we have another full moon in one calendar month on August 31st, this time in Aquarius, Sidereal Aquarius, in Shatabishaj, that stormy sign I mentioned. So we're definitely seeing things maybe come to a head in that sense as well in terms of storms. So this is the August 1st full moon, 15 degrees of Sidereal Capricorn. It is with Pluto, not a close conjunction. It's still with Pluto leading up to this full moon. So again, it's highlighting the themes of Pluto and Capricorn. And really, Pluto and Capricorn, though it will be a transit we'll feel for many, many years, and we've just started it since 2020, it's really essentially the disintegration of our current system. Whatever system you've relied upon thus far, whether it's a global banking system, whether it's a government, whether it's a system that you have going on in your own life in relation to this sign, whatever it is, it has to change, and it will slowly change over time. But as that's changing, you know, we have to put in new systems, because what do we have after Capricorn? We have Aquarius, which is all about progress and innovation. But of course, Saturn is in Aquarius and it's retrograde right now, and it's asking us to maybe think twice about that and maybe go back to the drawing board if that didn't work, and maybe let's try it this way. But it's definitely about progress all the same. So there's definitely this theme of, as we change the old system and slowly remove it, we need to actually bring in the new system. And the reason I'm saying this for this full moon and the next full moon by the end of August is that it's highlighting this transition from the full moon in Capricorn to the full moon in Aquarius. We're basically, essentially, more immediately, but overall, I would say in this whole period, been asked to, let's embrace the new. Let's embrace the new, whatever tech, whatever system, whatever monetary or government system, or whatever it is, system in your own life. There's a need now to really embrace the new and to make some changes. And that means dropping the old. But you cannot drop the old overnight, because you don't necessarily have the new system up and running, right? That's for the world and for you personally. But we all have to do this. And that's what this transition from full moon to full moon in these two signs, Capricorn, Aquarius, highlights. So that is the full moon, August 1st. The new moon then in the middle of the month, August 16th, the very last degree of Sidereal Cancer. This is a very volatile juncture. This is the reason why we're seeing so many storms as well, because Venus has been over here, back and over here twice already. Mars has been through here previous, Mercury. And so this juncture between the water sign Cancer and the fire sign Leo obviously highlights the intense storms. It really stirs things up. And so now we have a new moon here, the very last degree of Cancer. Obviously, this highlights another month of intense storms, especially, like I said, maybe a culmination by the full moon by the end of the month, August 31st. So this is a time, obviously, apart from storms, is to think about our attachments, because this lunar mansion Ashlesha is very much about how we attach and who do we attach to, whether it's a person, a thing, an idea, whatever it is, you know, a routine, whatever it is in your chart. It's basically about thinking about maybe new routines and attachments, I would say, because, you know, we routinely think about things and about the same things, about the same people, about the same whatever. We get attached. That's our nature. That's what the sign Cancer highlights. You know, we devote ourselves to something, we feel good about it, and then we get clingy. That's essentially what Ashlesha means. It's the embracing one, the clinging one. So we had to think about, what are we attached to? What are we focused on, and maybe refocus. And so this new moon in Ashlesha, you know, might stir it up for us. The other thing about Ashlesha is it's very much about energy and manipulating energy. Now, manipulation as well is highlighted in terms of attachment, because if you're attached to someone, you're going to, you know, likely manipulate them because you want them to stay attached. Right, so we start to cling, and that's Cancer all over, right? It's like that clinging, the crab and its claws won't let go. But in another way, you can use it in terms of manipulating energy in a spiritual sense also, or even just if you want to think of it as an energetic sense. So one of the symbols is a coiled serpent, and we can think about the Kundalini Shakti, the energy that resides at the base of the spine, and how we can transform our energy. And so that's essentially what this means. And it has a lot of connotations with health and healing, of course, but also more beyond that. It's like this transformation that can occur when we transform our energy, when we move from our baser instincts of attachments and fear, and then we elevate that through and that transform that into something else. And so when you think about the coiled energy at the base of the spine, the coiled serpent, and the waking up of the serpent like this, as if it was standing on its, straight up, that kind of evolution, I guess you could say this new moon certainly could express in some way, shape, or form in your life. So it's like, again, thinking about how you attach your thoughts, your sense, your feelings, because you like the thing or you love the person or the thing, and how that becomes maybe too clingy, and how you maybe can loosen that at this time. Because, and the reason why I'm saying all of this, of course, is because of also Venus retrograde here. So it's that we have to think about our attachment and even just our attachment style, and maybe how we can just loosen that for a while and see where that goes. See all the energy that's bound up as well in our relationships, and how we can loosen that kind of bind. And of course, although things can become very loose and uncertain and unclear in a way, in another way, if we allow it, we can really transform ourselves and our relationships through this and open ourselves up more to other potentials, other possibilities, and who knows where it can go, so it's definitely a new start in that sense. So that's the new moon on August 16th. And then we finish the month with another full moon. This time, again, like I said, it's in the following sign, Aquarius. So the sun has now moved into Sidereal Leo with moon in Aquarius. And it really is highlighting these juxtaposed positions between Leo and Aquarius, because now the sun and Saturn are opposed. So previously we had Mars and Saturn opposed for all these wildfires and this intense restriction because of that, and this angst that's been, felt. Now we're going to continue that angst with Sun Saturn. And in a way, this is more of an angst. Every time you have Sun Saturn battling it out, in a sense, they're both very strong in their own signs, Leo and Aquarius. We have these big themes of sort of like life and death, and, good and evil, and, light and dark, and confidence and doubt. We have to battle it out. We have to think about where are we capable, and where do we need to question ourselves, and if we're challenged, do we kind of stand our ground and try and create this kind of sense of bravado and bluster where it's a bit hollow, or do we kind of question ourselves when others question us, and actually use that in a very purposeful way, in a very useful way, that it's not just about questioning for no reason. It's about, well, okay, maybe I could look at this again, and maybe I could work harder at this. If I doubt what I'm doing, or others are doubting my abilities, maybe I could try harder, and not just expect it to just be, look at me, and aren't I great, and I should be just acknowledged for who I am. Maybe you do also need to make some effort here. And so this Sun Saturn is about focusing our efforts and working on something, and while still appreciating our abilities and our unique perspectives and our talents, but not knocking ourselves down to the point where we can't get back up again. We need to obviously think about this as in a balanced way, because certainly this could highlight dynamics as such as, someone questioning themselves to the point where they have this kind of identity crisis even. So the sun is very much about the sense of self in Leo, with Mercury retrograde there and Saturn opposite. We might, question ourselves to the point where we doubt ourselves so much we don't do anything. We don't feel ourselves. We don't know what we're doing. We feel lost, and it's definitely, again, expressing this sort of existentialism in a way that we have going on right now, and it's kind of like a continued theme around this. So yeah, we need to question ourselves and what we're doing. We don't want to be let loose and just do whatever we want and self-promote ourselves without anything to back it up. We do obviously have to work on something, but we don't have to knock ourselves down while we do that, or anyone else for that matter. So that is the full moon on August 31st, and that is the month of August. Thank you so much for watching. If you watched all the way through to the end, please hit the like button, subscribe if you'd like to get more content. I will be posting the sign-based forecast very soon. If you're a patron, you'll get it before anyone else, and you'll get so much more. So consider becoming a patron. Please leave your comments if you have any thoughts or comments about August. any of your own personal experiences around these transits or any questions that you have. I'd love to hear from you. And thank you so much again for watching. Wishing you all the very best for the month ahead. And until next time.